You know the phrase? I mean, if you have ever bought a house, sold a house, thought about buying a house, or even just, watched one of those reality shows where a couple with a budget of $10 is looking for a mansion, you have heard it.
Oh, absolutely. Location, location, location.
It is the single most overused cliche in the entire real estate industry. It's the golden rule.
It is. It's supposed to be the beginning and the end of the conversation.
But here's the thing that always bothers me about cliches like that.
Yeah.
We say them so much that they kind of lose all their meaning. I mean, when my friends say they need a good location, what they usually mean is something incredibly vague.
Right. It's not a technical term for them.
No. It's like, I want to be near a Trader Joe's,
Yeah.
or I want a school district where the kids actually go to college, or maybe just, I don't want to hear the highway from my bedroom.
And that's really been the traditional definition for, the last 50, maybe 60 years? Location has always been about those static amenities.
Static, what do you mean by that?
It was about the things that don't change. It was about the view. It was about the trees on the street. It was about the absence of negatives. Like you said, no noise, no crime. It was very much about isolation.
Right, the whole white picket fence dream. You get your little fortress of solitude, and as long as the fortress itself is nice and quiet, the location is considered good.
Exactly. But today, for this deep dive, we are going to completely dismantle that definition. We are looking at a stack of research that suggests the whole idea of prime real estate has fundamentally shifted.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's not about the view from the kitchen window anymore. It's not about how green your lawn is. It's about access. Specifically, can you get on a train? And can you walk to get a cup of coffee?
So we are talking about planes, trains, and automobiles, or well, I guess mostly just trains and shoes.
We're looking at the financial power of access. And I want to be really clear right off the bat. We aren't just talking about lifestyle here or, convenience. This isn't just about how nice it is to be able to walk to brunch.
Okay.
We are talking about wealth preservation. We are talking about how a sidewalk or a train platform can act as a financial firewall when the rest of the economy is, burning to the ground.
Whoa. Okay, I'm going to stop you there because that sounds like a massive exaggeration. A financial firewall?
It does, I know.
You're seriously saying that being near a subway station actually protected people's bank accounts during a major crash? Because that sounds like something a real estate agent would put on a flyer to sell a condo.
It does sound like marketing fluff, doesn't it? But the data here is it's shockingly robust on this point. We're basing this whole deep dive on 2 landmark reports.
Okay, what are we working with?
The first one is called The New Real Estate Mantra. It was a massive study commissioned by the American Public Transportation Association, that's APTA, and the National Association of Realtors back in 2013.
2013. Okay, so that's interesting timing. They're looking back at the wreckage of the 2008 crash.
Exactly, and that timing is critical. They had the benefit of hindsight. They could look at the housing bubble when it burst and see exactly who survived and who didn't, who was left standing.
And the second source.
The second source is a paper called Walking the Walk, written by Joe Courtwright for an organization called CEOs for Cities. That one came out in 2009, so right in the thick of it. So we have the transit data and we have the walkability data.
Okay, so our mission today is to combine these 2 things, the train tracks and the sidewalks, to figure out if they actually make us richer, or, maybe more accurately, keep us from going broke.
That is the mission. We want to quantify in actual dollars and cents what a walkable neighborhood is worth. And we really want to understand that core finding from the first report. Why homes near public transit survived the Great Recession significantly better than homes that were completely dependent on cars.
All right, let's dive into that first report then, the new real estate mantra. Because the context here is just, it's everything. We're talking about the period between 2006 and 2011.
The dark days, absolutely, the absolute depths of the housing crisis.
I think anyone who owned a home, or God, tried to sell one during that period probably has a bit of PTSD. The bubble burst. Values didn't just dip, they fell off a cliff.
It was a bloodbath. And it's really important to set the expectations for you listening here. When we say some homes outperformed, we don't necessarily mean that everyone in those homes made money.
Right, that's a key distinction.
The recession was a tidal wave. Everyone got wet. If you owned a home in Phoenix or Las Vegas in 2009, you lost value, period. But this study wasn't about who won. It was about the rate of decline.
So it's the difference between say, breaking your leg and losing lay entirely.
A grim analogy, but yes, it fits. So they analyzed 5 major regions: Boston, Chicago, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Phoenix, and San Francisco. A really good mix of city types.
Old cities, new cities, car cities, transit cities.
Exactly. And they took thousands and thousands of property records and divided them into 2 camps. Camp A, the transit shed. Camp B, the non-transit area.
Transit shed. Sounds like a place where you store old buses at night. Can we define that?
Yeah, it's a technical term, but it's simple enough. In this study, a transit shed is defined very specifically as the area that falls within a half a mile of fixed guideway transit.
Okay, fixed guideway. I'm assuming that means something a little more substantial than just a bus stop sign on a telephone pole.
That is probably the most important distinction in the entire study. Fixed guideway means there are, well, fixed guides. It means heavy rail, like a subway, light rail, commuter rail, or bus rapid transit BRT.
The kind of bus that has its own dedicated lane and, like, concrete platforms?
That's the one, where the bus has its own permanent infrastructure.
So why does that matter so much? I mean, a bus gets you to work just like a train does. Why does the real estate market care if it's on rails or tires?
Think about it from an investor's perspective, or even just a homeowner's. If the city comes along and paints a white line on the road and puts up a little bus stop sign, yeah, they can come back tomorrow with a bucket of black paint and a wrench, and that bus route is gone. It's temporary. It's written in pencil.
Right. And routes get cut all the time in budget crises. I've seen it happen.
All the time. But if the city decides to rip up the street, lay down heavy steel rails, pour concrete for platforms, and install all the overhead electrical wires, that is written in ink. That is a multi-generational, multi-billion-dollar commitment.
It's permanent.
It's as permanent as infrastructure gets. If you buy a house near a subway station, you have a very, very high degree of confidence that the station will still be there in 30 years when you go to sell.
All right.
And that permanence creates tangible value. It signals to the market that this location is connected to the economic heart of the region, basically forever.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we have the transit shed, that half-mile radius around the steel rails, and then we have the non-transit area, which is, I guess, everything else.
Everything else. The car-dependent suburbs, the cul-de-sacs, the places where you have to get in a car to get a carton of milk.
So what happened when the market crashed? What did the data show?
Across all 5 of those very different regions, when you average it all out, properties located within the transit shed outperformed the region as a whole by 41.6%.
Wait, say that again?
41.6%.
That's not a small number. That is huge. I mean, if I'm looking at my investment portfolio and one asset performs over 40% better than another during a historic crash, that's the difference between retiring and working until I'm 90.
Precisely. And we have to keep hammering this point home.
No.
Outperform here mostly means dropped significantly less. But think about the psychology of that for a homeowner.
Yeah.
If you are living in a car-dependent suburb 5 miles out from anything and your home value drops by 40%, you are almost certainly underwater on your mortgage.
You owe more than the house is worth.
You can't sell. You can't refinance. You are trapped.
Right.
And if you lose your job, which so many people did.
If you foreclose, that's the end of the story.
Right. But if you're in that transit shed and your value only drops by 5%, or maybe it even stays flat, you still have equity. You have options. It functions as a very real financial buffer.
But why? What's the mechanism? Is it really just because people like trains? Or is there something else going on? Because 2008 wasn't just a housing crash. It was also an oil shock, right? Gas prices were insane.
That is the other half of the equation.
Oh.
We often forget this, but in the summer of 2008, gas prices hit historic highs. It was over $4 a gallon in most of the U.S., which, adjusted for inflation, is incredibly painful for families.
So you had this perfect storm, this double whammy.
Exactly. People were losing their jobs or were terrified for their income. And at the exact same moment, the cost of just driving to work skyrocketed.
So that big house out in the exurbs, the one where you have to drive 45 minutes to get a gallon of milk, suddenly went from being the American dream to being a massive financial liability.
It became a trap, an anchor. Meanwhile, that smaller house or the townhome near the train station where you could maybe get rid of your second car or just drive a whole lot less.
That became a lifeboat.
It became a lifeboat. And the market, which is really just a collection of millions of individual decisions, recognized that efficiency and that safety almost immediately.
It's so interesting to me that this held true across such different cities because, usually when we talk about public transit, we think of New York or Boston. places where, everyone takes the
The
train.
old legacy systems.
But this study looked at Phoenix. I've been to Phoenix. Nobody takes the train in Phoenix. Everyone drives.
Well, let's dig into the specific cities, because the report calls this section a tale of 5 cities. And the nuances are really, really telling. You are absolutely right. The culture of the city mattered a lot less than the basic physics of access.
Okay, so let's start with the classic example first. Let's go to Boston.
Boston is the undisputed superstar of this data set. It has an old, established, well-used system, the T. People there get it.
And the numbers in Boston were frankly ridiculous. I was looking at the report, and it says that in the Boston region, the transit station areas outperform the rest of the region by 129%.
It is a staggering number. It's almost hard to comprehend. But what that means is that while the greater Boston area, the suburbs, the exurbs, saw significant price drops during the crash, the areas right near the T, specifically the rapid transit lines,
Is the subway lines.
they actually saw price increases in some cases. They were an island of stability. They completely ignored the recession.
There was one specific data point in the report that actually circled 3 times because I was sure it was a typo. The Mattapan station.
Ah, yes, the Mattapan high-speed line. It's a classic.
The report lists the relative performance difference for the area around the Mattapan station at 3,437%.
It looks like a typo, doesn't it? It jumps off the page.
It looks like a lie. How can something outperform by over 3,000%? That doesn't even sound real.
So we have to geek out on the math for just a second to explain that one. It's not that prices went up by 3,000%. It's a measurement of the gap in performance.
Right.
So imagine the average home in the wider region lost, let's say, 15% of its value, a pretty bad drop. But homes near the Mattapan station actually gained a tiny little bit, maybe 1% or 2%. They just held their ground.
I see.
So when you compare those two trajectories, one diving deep into the red, the other staying just slightly in the black, the statistical outperformance gap between those two lines is mathematically massive.
So it's not that the houses suddenly became gold mines overnight. It's that they were the only things not sinking in a sea of sinking ships.
That is the perfect analogy. They were life rafts. And Mattapan is such an interesting case because it's at the end of the line. It's not fancy downtown condos. These are working class neighborhoods by and large.
Right.
But that connection to the red line, that fundamental ability to get into downtown Boston for a job without needing a car, was so incredibly valuable during the crash that it put a solid floor into the prices.
It really proves that this kind of access isn't just a luxury for the rich. It's an economic necessity for everyone.
You could argue it's more critical for working class families who are much more sensitive to fluctuations in gas prices and car repair bills.
Okay, so that's Boston. That one is almost, it's easy to believe. Bostonians love their trains. But let's go to the complete opposite. Let's go to the desert. Let's talk about Phoenix.
The anti-Boston.
Right. Phoenix is the poster child for American sprawl. It's just this endless grid of 6-lane highways stretching to the horizon.
Yeah.
And yet, this study included it.
And this is where the findings get really, really interesting because it tests the theory in a hostile environment. Context is absolutely key here. During the study period, the Metro Light Rail in Phoenix was brand new. It opened in December of 2008.
So, right in the middle of the crash.
The worst possible time.
Talk about bad timing. Hey, everyone, the entire global economy is collapsing, but here's a shiny new train.
You'd think it would be a total failure. And you have to remember, Phoenix was ground zero for the housing crash. Entire neighborhoods of new houses were built, never occupied and foreclosed on. There were ghost towns in some of the suburbs. Prices just plummeted everywhere.
So you would expect the areas around the new train to tank just as hard as everything else.
You would, but they didn't. The transit shed, that half-mile zone around the new stations, still outperformed the wider region by 37%.
In a city where, 98% of people drive for every single trip? How is that possible?
It comes down to a fundamental economic principle we talked about earlier, scarcity. In Boston, living near a train is common. There are lots of options. In Phoenix, at that time, it was incredibly rare. Only about 2% of all the households in the region lived within that new transit shed.
So it was a scarce and valuable commodity.
Exactly. Even in a city that is completely built around the car, there is still a segment of the population, students at ASU, workers downtown, people who just hate driving in traffic, who desperately want that access.
Well, there was nowhere for them to live before.
There was a massive pent-up demand, a huge shortage of walkable urbanism. So when that light rail finally opened, all that demand funneled into those few neighborhoods along the line.
So the crash decimated the cookie-cutter suburbs. because there was basically an infinite supply of them.
Yeah.
You could always build another one farther out.
Yes.
But the rail-connected housing was extremely limited, so it held its value because people were competing for it.
It's Economics 101, supply and demand. The supply of house in the desert with a two-car garage was endless. The supply of house near the train was tiny.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, let's hop over to Chicago.
Yeah.
Because there was a really specific quirk in the Chicago data that I found fascinating. The Townhome Anomaly.
I love the Townhome Anomaly. It sounds like a Robert Ludlum spy novel.
The Townhome Anomaly. So, in general, Chicago followed the pattern. The transit areas did better than the suburbs. But when they broke the data down by the type of house, townhomes just went crazy.
Right. So overall, the Chicago Transit Shed beat the region by about 30%, a solid number. But townhomes that were located inside the transit shed outperformed the region by 63%.
Wow.
They did better than condos. They did better than single-family detached houses. They were the star performer.
Why? What is it about a townhome that made it the killer app of the recession?
So we have to speculate a little bit on the demographics here, but it fits a very logical pattern. Think about who typically buys a townhome in a city like Chicago.
I'm guessing young professionals, maybe young families who are just starting out.
Exactly. It's what you might call the Goldilocks product. Maybe you're moving out of a cramped one-bedroom condo downtown because you want a dog or you're having a kid, but you are not ready to move to the far suburbs and buy a riding lawnmower.
You want a little more space, but you still want the city life. You still want to be able to get on the train.
You want that connection. And in 2008, that demographic was probably terrified of the financial commitment of buying a McMansion in the suburbs. The townhome represented a safe middle ground. It was efficient living. You have lower heating and cooling bills than a big detached house. You don't have a massive yard to maintain. And if it's near the CTA, you don't need two cars. It was the sensible, proven choice during an era of profound economic fear.
It's so interesting how fear and uncertainty drive these market trends. The flight to safety wasn't just people buying gold bars, it was people buying townhomes near the blue line.
That's a great way to put it. It was a flight to a safer, more efficient lifestyle.
And just to round out the map for everyone, San Francisco and Minneapolis, what did we see there?
Very similar stories, as you'd expect. San Francisco predictably showed massive resilience. The transit areas there outperformed by 37%. And there was a great little detail in the report about the Pleasant Hill BERT station.
What was that?
They found that homes located within 1 mile of that station were valued, on average, 9% higher than comparable homes just outside that radius. So it's not just about surviving a crash. There's just a pure baseline price premium for being close.
A location premium, plain and simple. And Minneapolis.
Minneapolis outperformed by 48%. And you have to remember, Minneapolis has pretty extreme weather, so the value of a reliable, warm train ride versus having to dig your car out of a snowbank is very, very tangible there.
Okay, so we've established pretty clearly that this phenomenon is real. From the heat of the desert to the snow of the Midwest, the train tracks seem to act as this powerful value anchor. But I want to go deeper into the why.
Yeah.
We touched on gas prices, but the report gets into the nitty-gritty of connectivity.
Right, because this is a crucial point. Not all transit is created equal. You can't just build a station out in the middle of a cornfield, run a train once a day at 4 in the morning, and expect property values to magically double.
That's the classic field of dreams approach to urban planning. If you build it, they will come.
And in transit planning, that almost never works. The report uses a metric to measure this, called the Transit Connectivity Index, or TCI.
Okay, translate TCI for us.
Basically, it measures two simple but critical things, frequency and reach.
How often does the train come, and how many places can I get to?
Exactly. How often does the train come, and how many jobs can I get to within, say, a 30-minute ride? A station that connects to a huge job center is worth more than one that goes to a small town.
So a subway that comes every 5 minutes is worth way more to the market than a commuter rail line that only comes once an hour during rush hour.
Exponentially more. The study found a direct linear correlation. The higher the frequency and the better the reach, the higher the TCI, the higher the home value protection was.
Do they have an example of that?
Yeah, the Phoenix example was perfect. The transit shed there had an average TCI of over 23,000 rides per week available from its stations. The regional average for the bus system was just 4,400.
Wow, that's a 5x difference.
That is the difference between transit as a useful lifestyle option and transit is just a hobby. If you can walk out your front door without even checking a schedule and know a train will be there in 5 or 10 minutes, That is true freedom. That is what the market is willing to pay for.
And that freedom translates into cold, hard cash. This brings us to the second paycheck concept.
This is one of my favorite parts of real estate economics because it's the hidden variable. It's the thing nobody thinks about until it's too late. When you go to a bank to get a mortgage, what do they look at?
They look at my income and my debt. My debt-to-income ratio, can I afford to pay the monthly mortgage bill?
Right. They look at what's called PITI, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. What they do not look at is your transportation costs. But for the average American household, transportation is the second largest expense right after housing.
Cars are just money pits. Insurance, gas repairs, depreciation.
They are. The average cost to own and operate a single car is thousands and thousands of dollars a year. The report found that in Phoenix, households living in the transit shed spent, on average, $175 less per month on transportation than the regional average.
That's a decent chunk of change.
It is. But look at Chicago. In the dense CTA shed, households spent nearly $300 less per month.
$300 a month. That's $3,600 a year.
That is a significant amount of money. If you are a family making, say, $60,000 a year, that $3,600 is your emergency fund. It's your family vacation. Or back in 2009, it was the difference between making the mortgage payment or defaulting on your loan.
The report actually mentions a study on default rates, right? This isn't just a theory.
Yes, and this is the absolute smoking gun for the whole wealth protection argument. There was another study that looked at 40,000 mortgages, and it showed that people living in these location-efficient areas, meaning walkable, transit-rich zones, were significantly less likely to default on their loans than people in car-dependent areas, even if they had similar incomes.
Because they had that cushion, that flexibility.
Because when the husband lost his job, they could sell the second car and instantly save $500 a month. You can't sell your commute if you live in the exurbs. You are stuck with that cost no matter what.
That is such a powerful reframing. We usually think of the cities being expensive because the housing prices are higher. But if you view housing plus transportation as one single combined bill, the map can change completely.
There's a whole movement around this. It's called the H+T Affordability Index, and it often shows that the cheap house way out in the suburbs is actually the most expensive life.
Drive till you qualify turns into drive till you go broke.
That's the trap. Exactly.
All right, we spent a lot of time on the rails, but I want to pivot now because not everyone lives near a train station, but almost everyone uses a sidewalk. Or at least they should.
This is the last mile problem, or in this case, the first mile from your front door.
Let's look at that second report we mentioned at the top. Walking the Walk by Joe Courtwright. This moves the magnifying glass from the big metro map down to the neighborhood block.
And this report introduces us to a metric that has basically become the industry standard. It's on Zillow, it's on Redfin, it's the Walk Score.
I see this everywhere now. Walk Score, 92, Biker's Paradise. But back in 2009, when this paper came out, this was pretty cutting-edge stuff.
It absolutely was. Before Walk Score, the idea of walkability was totally subjective. A real estate agent would just say, oh, it's a lovely walking neighborhood, which usually just meant there were sidewalks. It didn't mean you could actually go anywhere useful.
Right. It meant you can walk your dog around the block in circles.
Exactly. Walk Score came along and created an algorithm to quantify the utility of walking. It's a number from 0 to 100 that measures what you can do on foot.
So how does the robot decide the score? Is it just measuring the square footage of concrete?
No, it's measuring destinations. The algorithm takes your specific address and calculates the walking distance to 13 specific categories of amenities, things you need for daily life.
Like what?
Grocery stores, coffee shops, schools, parks, bars, restaurants, hardware stores, libraries, things like that.
So it's basically the can I run my daily errands on foot?
Yes. And it's weighted by distance. If you can walk to the grocery store in under 5 minutes, about a quarter mile, you get maximum points for that category. If it's a 10-minute walk, you get fewer points. And if it's over a mile away, which is about a 20-minute plus walk,
You get 0 points. Because at that point, 99% of Americans are getting in the car.
correct. So a score of 0 to 24 is car dependent. You need a car for literally everything. A score of 90 to 100 is a walker's paradise. You barely need a car at all.
So the researchers at CEOs for Cities asked the obvious multi-million-dollar question, what is a point worth? If I live in a house with a walk score of 80 and my neighbor down the street has an identical house with a walk score of 79, is my house worth more?
And the answer resoundingly was yes. They found that in most typical markets, a single 1-point increase in walk score was associated with an increase in home value of between $700 and $3,000
To a point.
per point.
So let's play that out. If I move from a neighborhood with a score of 50, which is sort of somewhat walkable, to a neighborhood with a score of 80, which is very walkable, that 30-point jump could be worth, I mean, at the high end, that's $90,000.
In high-demand markets, absolutely. The report gives a stunningly clear example from Charlotte, North Carolina. They compared two neighborhoods. One was called Ashley Park, which had an average walk score of 54. The other was Wilmore, which had a score of 71.
Okay, so that's a 17-point difference. Wilmore is better, but it's not, Greenwich Village.
No, not at all. But that modest 17-point difference translated into a $34,000 increase in the average home value. For otherwise similar homes, that was a 12% jump in value, just for being closer to stuff.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second, because this sounds a lot like correlation, not necessarily causation. Maybe the Wilmore neighborhood just had nicer houses. Maybe they all had granite countertops and Ashley Park had laminate from the 70s. Maybe the schools were better. How do you know for sure the price bump is because of the walking?
That is the single hardest part of real estate economics, separating the value of the house from the value of the where. And the researchers used a very powerful statistical method to do this called hedonic regression.
Hedonic regression. It sounds like a terrible indie band from the 90s.
It does, but think of it like unbundling a cable package. Or even better, think of a shopping cart at the grocery store.
Yeah.
When you buy a house, you aren't buying one single thing called a house. You are buying a cart full of attributes.
Okay.
In that cart, you have an item that says 3 bedrooms. You have another item that says 2 bathrooms. You have granite counters. You have good school district. You have near a park.
And each of those things has its own invisible price tag attached to it.
Exactly. Hedonic regression is a mathematical way of looking at thousands and thousands of home sales to figure out the specific price tag of each individual item in the cart. It says, okay, we have 2 identical houses, same size, same year built, same number of bathrooms, but house A is in a walkable area and sells for $300,000. House B is in a car-dependent area and sells for $270,000.
So the math just isolates that one variable. The walkability premium is $30,000.
Precisely. By controlling for all the other stuff, the granite, the bedrooms, the age of the roof, they proved that people are willing to pay a specific quantifiable premium for sidewalk access.
But why? I get the train thing. That's very rational. The train saves me money on owning a car. But walking to a coffee shop, is that purely a financial calculation? Or is there something else, something less tangible going on?
I think this moves us beyond simple dollars and cents and into what you might call the lifestyle dividend, or what urbanists like the great Jane Jacobs used to call the sidewalk ballet.
Ah, Jane Jacobs, eyes on the street.
Eyes on the street. The idea is that a truly walkable neighborhood isn't just a collection of roads and buildings, it's a social ecosystem. When you walk, you see other people, you bump into your neighbors at the bakery. There is a constant low-level sense of eyes on the street.
Which creates a sense of safety.
It creates safety, and it creates what the report calls vibrancy. The study found positive correlations between walk score and home value in 13 of the 15 markets they studied. This suggests that people are paying for the feeling of the neighborhood. They want to be where the action is. They want that ambient sense of community.
A feeling you just don't get in a cul-de-sac where everyone drives directly into their garage and closes the door behind them.
You don't get it at all. That vibe is worth real money.
But you said it was positive in 13 of 15 markets. That means 2 markets bucked a trend. So where does walkability fail to create value?
The 2 outliers were Las Vegas and Bakersfield.
Of course it's Vegas. Everything is weird in Vegas.
In Las Vegas, at the time of the study, a higher walk score actually correlated with lower home values.
That is just bizarre. So the more walkable your neighborhood was, the less your house was worth. Why on earth would that be?
So we have to look at the local context. First, there's the obvious reason, the climate. Walking around Las Vegas in the middle of July is not a pleasant luxury. It's a heat stroke risk.
It's a survival situation, not an amenity.
Right. So walking isn't seen as a desirable activity, but there's a bigger, more structural factor. In many of these sprawling, newer Western cities, the areas with the highest walk scores, the older downtowns or the areas near commercial strips, were often the more run-down, lower-income neighborhoods.
Ah, so in that specific context, walkable was a proxy for poor.
In those specific cities, yes. The study theorizes that if you were walking in Vegas in 2009, it likely signaled to the market that you couldn't afford a car. Whereas in Boston or San Francisco or Chicago, being able to walk everywhere signals that you are wealthy enough to afford to live in a prime central neighborhood.
It's the critical difference between walking because you want to and walking because you have to.
That is the perfect way to phrase it. Walkability is what economists would call a luxury good, primarily in dense, established, and often wealthier cities. In Bakersfield, there was just no significant correlation at all. It just didn't seem to matter to buyers one way or the other.
So the lesson is, this isn't a universal law of physics. It really depends on the local culture and the actual urban design. If the walk is ugly or dangerous or just miserably hot, nobody is going to pay a premium for it.
Exactly.
There's also the nuance of being too close to things. The report mentioned Portland, Oregon, and this idea of the rattle factor.
Oh, this is such a crucial detail for anyone actually looking to buy a home. The Portland data was very specific. It showed that people paid a significant premium to be near the light rail. But if the house was right on top of the tracks, like literally backing up to the rail line, the value actually dropped.
Because nobody wants to hear the ding-ding-ding of the crossing guard at 6 a.m. or feel their house shake.
Right. There's a nuisance halo right next to the infrastructure. The sweet spot, the report found, is usually between a quarter mile and a half mile away.
Close enough to walk in 5 or 10 minutes, but far enough away that you don't hear the wheels squealing on the tracks.
Access without annoyance. That's the
Yeah.
golden ticket.
Okay, let's zoom out to the big picture for our final section here. If the data is this clear, if walkability and transit access literally print money for homeowners, why aren't we building more of it? Why is it still so hard to find a truly walkable neighborhood in America?
That is the billion-dollar, maybe trillion-dollar question. And the simplest answer is scarcity. The report mentions a 2007 survey that was done by the National Association of Realtors. They asked Americans a simple question: what kind of neighborhood do you want to live in? 57% said they would prefer to live in a home that was within walking distance of stores and businesses.
57%, that's a clear majority.
It's a huge majority. But now, look at our actual housing stock. Do 57% of American homes have a walk score over 70?
No way, not even close. It's probably like 10 or 15%, if that.
Exactly. We have a massive supply and demand mismatch. For the better part of 70 years, we have zoned our cities to make walkability illegal. We mandated huge setbacks. We separated residential houses from commercial shops. We built wide, fast roads that are hostile to pedestrians. We created an artificial scarcity of walkable urbanism.
And when you have incredibly high demand and artificially low supply.
Prices skyrocket.
Yeah.
That is precisely why you see what the report calls the new urbanist premium. They look at these new developments that are built from scratch to look like old towns places like Celebration, Florida, or Seaside.
They're almost like movie sets of old towns.
They are, but buyers will pay a premium of anywhere from 4 to 15% just to live in a fake walkable town because the real ones are so rare and so expensive.
We are so desperate for a sidewalk that leads somewhere that we will pay a massive premium for a simulation of one.
It's a little tragic in a way, but it also points to a huge economic opportunity. The market is just screaming for this product.
And building this way isn't just good for the homeowner's bottom line. It's also incredibly good for the city, right? The fiscal health argument.
This is the argument that should convince every single mayor and city council member in America. Walkable, high-density housing is a tax revenue goldmine for local governments. Think about a 50-story condo building on a single acre of land, or even just a block of dense townhomes.
That's a lot of property taxpayers packed onto a very small footprint of land.
Hundreds of taxpayers. Now compare the revenue from that 1 acre to a super Walmart with a massive 10-acre parking lot, or a quiet cul-de-sac with 4 big houses on 10 acres.
The city has to maintain the same amount of road, the same length of sewer pipe, for a tiny fraction of the tax revenue.
Exactly. Sprawl is a financial drain on cities. In most American cities, the dense, walkable core is subsidizing the money-losing suburbs. Financially solvent cities are almost always the ones with dense, walkable cores because that's where the wealth is generated per acre.
So if we have to synthesize all of this, we've flown from Boston to Phoenix, we've looked at the crash, we've analyzed the sidewalks. What is the big overarching takeaway for someone listening who isn't an urban planner or a real estate analyst?
I think the takeaway is that access is the new currency of real estate. In the 20th century, we valued isolation. We wanted the big lawn, the gated community, the escape from the noise of the city. We used our cars to bridge that gap. But the 21st century data, especially the stress test of the Great Recession, shows a fundamental reversal. We now value Connection?
You value resilience.
Resilience, 41.6% better performance near transit, up to $3,000 in added home value for every single point of walk score. These aren't rounding errors. These are fundamental drivers of wealth and financial stability.
It really makes you look at a train track or even just a simple sidewalk differently. It's not just a piece of concrete infrastructure. It's a component of your bank account.
It absolutely is. And that, I think, leads me to the final thought I want to leave everyone listening with. It's a bit of a provocation.
Let's hear it.
If we know empirically, definitively, that building a new transit line creates massive amounts of private wealth for the homeowners lucky enough to live nearby. If your house value goes up by $50,000 just because the city built a station down the street, why do we struggle so much as a society to fund the station in the first place?
That's the value capture question.
It is. Right now, the public pays for the infrastructure through taxes, and the private homeowner gets to keep all of the profit from the resulting value increase. Should we have mechanisms in place to capture a tiny slice of that new value to help pay for the train that created it?
That is a very dangerous question to ask a homeowner. Hey, congratulations on your new equity. Now give me some of it.
It is politically difficult, to say the least. But if the alternative is not building the train at all, and everyone's value stagnates and our cities become more congested, maybe it's a deal worth making. It's a fundamental question of public investment and private gain.
It's a debate for another time, perhaps.
Thank you.
But it's definitely something for you to chew on the next time you're walking to get your coffee or waiting for the train.
Indeed.
That's it for this deep dive into the hidden value of your commute. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on next one.
Take care.